Okay, let's talk about something we all chase, and let's be honest, most of us really struggle with work-life balance. It's that classic quest to juggle our jobs with our personal lives. But what if the whole idea of balance is actually a myth? For decades, the goal has been this perfect 50-50 split, like a scale that's perfectly weighted on both sides. But in a world where your office is basically in your pocket, is that kind of clean separation even possible anymore? And maybe more importantly, is it even what we really want? This really gets to the heart of the shift we're seeing. On the left, you've got the old myth of balance, these two separate worlds with a hard wall between them. But the reality for so many of us now, over on the right, is a lot more like an infinity loop. We're moving from this idea of balance to something we're calling equilibrium, a much more fluid integration where work and life just blend together. And that brings us to the core idea of this whole explainer. It's really time to stop this shaky balancing act and start creating a personal equation. A unique formula that actually works for your life. So we're calling this new model the American equilibrium because it's based on some really big trends we're seeing. The key here is that it's not about separating work and life, but about integrating them on purpose. It's dynamic, meaning it can change as your life changes, and it's super personal. The goal is to align your time with what you value, not just what the clock says. So what does this equilibrium actually look like? Well, it's pretty much built on 4 key pillars. It all starts with having work that actually aligns with your core values. Then it's about creating flexible boundaries that you control. It also means you have to focus on your holistic well-being. We're talking mental, physical, and emotional health. And finally, it's all driven by this deep need to feel like you're making a meaningful contribution, both at work and outside of it. And listen, this isn't just some feel-good theory. This is a massive societal shift, and it's totally backed by data. It was probably kicked into high gear by new tech and that huge reevaluation of what matters that happened post-pandemic. So let's dig into the numbers and see what Americans are really prioritizing now. Now, just look at this. This is fascinating. For a massive chunk of the workforce, 45%, flexibility now outweighs everything else. That means more people value flexibility than finding meaningful work, and even more than how much they get paid. That is a gigantic shift in what people want from a job. What this data is really telling us is that there's a fundamental change in what we value. Control over when, where, and how you work, that's becoming the new currency. In this new equilibrium, having autonomy over your time is the real status symbol, and in many cases, it's worth more than the paycheck itself. And when we say flexibility, what does that actually mean to people? Well, it's not some vague idea. For an overwhelming 78%, it just means having flexible hours. Remote work and compressed work weeks are definitely popular, but the number one thing people want is the freedom to shape their own schedule. But here's the thing, this new equilibrium isn't a one-size-fits-all deal. Not at all. When you start to break it down by age, you see that what people prioritize changes dramatically from one generation to the next. This table just lays it all out so clearly. You see boomers, who tend to put stability and compensation first, and they really see work as separate from life. Then you have millennials, who are looking for growth and flexibility. For them, work is an important part of life. But then look at Gen Z. Their top priority is meaning and impact, and they see work as something that should be totally integrated with the rest of their life and their values. And this quote from a Gen Z worker just brings that data to life, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that mindset. It's not about punching a clock and escaping at 5 p.m. It's about making your work a meaningful, seamless part of a life that you're actually proud to live. So, with all of that in mind, let's bring this right back to you. The big question is, how do you stop chasing this impossible myth of balance and start building your own personal equilibrium? So how do you actually find it? Here's a pretty simple 4-step framework. First, you have to identify your non-negotiables. What are the absolute must-haves in your life, like family dinner or your morning workout? Second, you need to audit your time and energy and be honest about where it's really going, not just where you think it is. Third, define your boundaries. Now, this isn't about building rigid walls. It's about creating flexible rules for when you're on and when you're off. And fourth, and this one is so crucial, you have to communicate those needs to your boss, to your family, and yeah, even to yourself. If there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this right here. We have to stop comparing ourselves to some universal, impossible standard of balance. The real goal, the one you can actually achieve, is to find a personal equilibrium that feels right, fulfilling, and sustainable for you. And that leads us to our final thought. This equation is totally different for everyone, and it's always changing. So the question we really want to leave you with is this. What does a life of meaningful integration actually look like for you? What's in your equilibrium?